Hello, podcast fam. I am thrilled to share some exciting news. My book, Sow, Grow, Lead, is officially live on Amazon. This book is more than just my story of starting a nonprofit and building a peanut butter factory in Malawi. So trust me, the ups and downs of that journey are worth the read. It's also packed with practical strategies to help nonprofit leaders like you tackle challenges with clarity, courage, and a whole lot of heart. If you've ever wondered how to turn your vision into reality, navigate the inevitable hurdles, and build something meaningful, whether in your organization or in your own life, this book is for you. I'd be so grateful for your support in spreading the word. Grab your copy of Sow, Grow, Lead in the show notes and on Amazon today. Let's keep sowing seeds of impact together. Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, which is dedicated to nonprofit leaders who are passionate about making a difference. I'm your host, Haley Cooper, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on a journey of growth, inspiration, and transformation. At Lead with Heart, we believe that leading with heart means embracing empathy, compassion, and authenticity in every aspect of our work. It's about putting people first, fostering genuine connections, and creating a positive impact that goes beyond numbers and metrics. In the nonprofit world, it can often feel like we're carrying the weight of the world on our shoulders. The challenges are immense and the road can be lonely. But here, you're not alone. This podcast is a community where we support each other, share our stories, and learn together. Each episode will dive into personal and professional development topics tailored specifically for nonprofit leaders. From innovative fundraising strategies and effective team management to self-care practices and leadership insights, we're here to provide you with practical strategies that you can apply to your life and work. My goal is to empower you, elevate your leadership, and engage your heart in all that you do. I want to help you navigate the unique challenges of the nonprofit sector with confidence and resilience, so you can continue to create meaningful change in the world. So whether you're driving to a meeting, taking a break, or winding down for the day, tune in and join us on this journey. Together, we'll discover what it truly means to lead with heart. Thank you for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Lead with Heart podcast. I am excited to welcome a dynamic and accomplished guest to the podcast, Derik Timmerman. He is the founder of Sparrow Nonprofit Solutions, a nationwide consulting firm that empowers nonprofits to maximize their world-changing impact. With a background that includes serving as a management consultant at McKinsey Company and a U.S. Army intelligence officer with 2 combat deployments to Iraq, Derik brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to the nonprofit sector. He's also a nationally recognized speaker and author on key topics like fundraising, grant research, and writing, and board development. And beyond his professional achievements, he is passionate about chocolate chip cookies, enjoys hiking with his 3 boys, and is dedicated to living out his life core purpose, building factories of hope. Well, first off, thank you for your service, Derik, and thank you for being here today.
Haley, it's a pleasure to be with you. It's great to be here.
Well, you've obviously had an incredible journey from being a U.S. Army intelligence officer to founding Sparrow Nonprofit Solutions. So how did your military experience shape your approach to nonprofit consulting, and what inspired you to make a transition into this field?
Oh, my goodness. Well, I guess I have to go with the military all the way back to West Point, because when you are there at the United States Military Academy, you are dragged once a week, twice a week to, at the time they called it Robinson Auditorium. They might have changed it since the name, but it's basically this big amphitheater indoor thing where speakers from around the world come and speak about leadership. And you'll have just a kind of a parade of the who's who of leaders from around the world that come through West Point to just speak on leadership. And at the time, you don't appreciate it because you're 19, 20, 21 years old. You've got homework to do, projects, everything. But over time, in your 20s, 30s, all of those voices come back to you. And it was all about selflessness that they would speak about, that leadership is about being the first one in, the last one out. You're the last one to eat. You are giving of yourself sacrificially when you are being a leader of character. So all those lessons from West Point came to bear when I was deployed during those 2 years in Iraq, in the initial invasion in 2003, and then there for a year, and then back for 18 months and another year over there. That time that I spent applying those lessons of selfless service and leadership really came back in a big way when I started working at first as a board member for nonprofits and then started the consultancy. So yeah, I guess there were lots of lessons along the way that brought selflessness to the forefront when it came to nonprofit leadership.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And can you talk a little bit more about any other key characteristics of leadership that you have cultivated in your own life from either your military experience or just lived experience of working with nonprofits, and some of the key characteristics and traits that you see in a leader?
What a question. I don't want to rehash maybe some of the familiar ones because a lot of your listeners and you and I have read the same books on leadership, but I think maybe one of the ones that goes maybe undermentioned is creativity. It takes a creative leader, especially in this day and age when we have all of these parts and pieces and tools and all these different ways to put things together. In a world where we can type a prompt into Chat GPT and get basically a whole blog post done for us, the creativity shifts from what would I write in that blog post to how would I use it? What topics would I focus on? What matters most to people? How do I riff off of the things that can be automated and produced? It takes a leader's creativity to put those into practice in a way that's going to move the needle for your nonprofit or for your organization if you're a for-profit. So yeah, creativity, I think, to use all the different tools, people's skills, strengths. Leaders need to be more creative than they ever have been.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that is such an important point. And I think a lot of nonprofits, or at least leaders that I've seen even in my own experience, I am so stuck with my head down that I feel like I can't come up for air and I get a block, or I can't think outside of what's already been done. So, and there's almost that creative block, right? And so how do you tell nonprofit leaders to cultivate that creativity? Are there specific things they can do? Or how can they continue to implement that creativity in their personal and professional life?
Yeah, I'll forget the quote from a pastor that I heard early on because there's a few parts to the quote, but the part that stands out to me the most that I bring as the answer to your question is read yourself full. I just am running into too many people these days who just don't read anymore. Podcasts are wonderful like this one. YouTube is incredible. Working with people live, mentors, everything for sure. But my goodness, books still need to have a huge place in any leader's professional development repertoire. So whenever you are hitting that creativity desert and you just really don't have that deep well to draw from, generally it's an indication that maybe we've got some more reading to do. We've got a little bit more to do in terms of reading ourselves full so that we can draw from that well of centuries of incredible ideas and wisdom that I think are being drawn upon less and less. And never in history have we been so rich in terms of being able to have any of the wisdom of the ages at our fingertips. But in many cases, we don't use it. So read yourself full is what I'd say.
Ooh, I love that. So Sparrow Nonprofit Solutions focuses on helping nonprofits maximize their impact. What are some of the most common challenges nonprofits face today, and how does your firm help them overcome these obstacles?
Yeah, thank you for the question. Like any small business or business owner, you tend to start out with this idea of what the market needs. And then if you're willing to let yourself get pushed around along the way, you get pushed into the surface lines or products that actually do end up being used by the market. And there's usually a big difference between where you land and where you started. For me, where I landed was 4 service lines that reflect the answer to your question is, what is it that nonprofit leaders need the most? The first is Fundraise, which is coming alongside executive directors or development directors to actually fundraise with them, to be a fundraising friend who kind of walks alongside them as they try to prioritize week over week what matters most in fundraising. That's Fundraise. Another one is Board Spark. So I think we all know from serving on boards or being around nonprofits that we have a real crisis in board engagement and leadership out there in most of our nonprofit boards. So what I've found is that you can actually achieve a heck of a lot in a well-prepared and run board retreat where you do interviews beforehand, you run the board retreat over the course of 2 days, you can spark a board into pretty remarkable action coming out of a board retreat. So Board Spark is the second one. We've also got Easy Grant, which is putting grant writing on autopilot. It's essentially week over week, we send letters of inquiry to our clients so that they can just basically look it over, sign it, and send it out with a letter of determination. And that is their grants program. So Easy Grant is our solution to finding that lots of nonprofit leaders have no idea how to kind of go about grants, or their eyes glaze over because it's boring sounding, or they don't want to go after it. Easy Grant is a way to put that on autopilot. The last is Gala Guide, which is our kind of how we come alongside nonprofits who are wanting to pull off their first gala. A signature annual event is an amazing tool. It ends up being an impact festival that a nonprofit leads every single year to draw everyone's eyes and hearts back to the mission. If a nonprofit is not doing a signature annual event, if your listeners are listening to this and they don't have one yet, my goodness, you're leaving huge impact and money on the table. So Gala Guide is our way to help them do that first. So yeah, those are the 4 needs that we've seen, and we created a service line that aligns against each one of those needs.
Imagine a fundraising partner that not only helps you raise more money, but also supports you in retaining your donors. A partner that helps you raise funds both online and on location so you can grow your impact faster. That's DonorBox, a comprehensive suite of tools, services, and resources that give fundraisers just like you a custom solution to tackle your unique challenges, helping you achieve the growth and sustainability your organization needs, helping you help others. Visit donorbox.org to learn more. Yeah, there's 2 that I want to dive into more, which would be the Fundraise and the Board Spark. I think a lot of nonprofits struggle with fundraising, or what you talked about, coming alongside the ED and helping them support. And it could either be because the ED doesn't understand fundraising, they're not educated in it, or they're the only person in the organization that has to do all of the things, right? Yeah, they don't have that support to be able to fundraise. So sometimes it gets put to the wayside. So can you talk a little bit more about your framework or what that really looks like to help support the ED in fulfilling their fundraising duties?
Absolutely. Yeah. I spoke at the Association of Fundraising Professionals annual gathering in New Orleans last year. And my talk was on exactly this point, which was how to prioritize way better in fundraising. Really, the kind of key miss with a lot of EDs and development directors, and why Fundraise helps so many nonprofits, is this issue of prioritization. When you wake up in the morning, any nonprofit leader wakes up and they can do a lot of different really good things with their time. They can spend that day a lot of different ways, and you can make an argument that all of them are valuable. But with fundraising, it's really hard to know what is the thing I'll do today that is going to be the most impactful. What should I prioritize most of all in how I spend this 1 hour of free time, this one day, this 1 week? What is going to move the needle the most? And that's really a difficult question for a lot of nonprofit leaders to ask, especially new ones, especially founders who don't yet have a sphere and don't yet have a lot of that database that's grown out. That's what we help nonprofit leaders do, is answer that question of what is the best way to prioritize this free hour that I have.
Yeah, and I think that's so important. And I recently posted on my social media, like, nonprofits don't have they're busy, and there's a productivity issue, right? It's an efficiency issue where we could be hosting the event, we could be doing this, we could be doing that. But without a solid strategy or structure in place, busyness doesn't equal productivity. Just because we have a lot of stuff on our to-do list doesn't mean we're actually being efficient and raising revenue for our mission or working towards the right goal and inviting the right people in, right? Maybe we're having meetings or we're emailing people, but it doesn't, if there's not that solid structure of who do you prioritize and how do you prioritize your time, you're not going to get where you want to go. And you're going to end up with that burnout at the end of the day where you're like, I did all of these things and I had all of these meetings, but what did I actually get done? And I think that's such an important piece of being able to fundraise is to prioritize in a lot of areas.
You're so right, Haley. Yeah. And hidden within kind of what you just said in terms of the kind of path toward burnout that many nonprofit leaders are on is this fact that there's a blind spot so often to the fact that I need to get more humans than just me involved in this. Sometimes the best way to use that spare hour is not me doing solo work to try to solo fundraise, to bring solo dollars into the organization. It's increasing the number of humans that are helping me do just that. One of the things that came out when I was writing my book, The 40 Laws of Nonprofit Impact, where I go and give case studies of lots of different nonprofits, is that almost every 50 plus year nonprofit that exists is a 50 plus year nonprofit because very early on in the first 5 or 10 years, they were obsessed with growing the number of volunteers into an army. In other words, the number of paid people that were doing real meaningful work for those nonprofits was relatively small, but they had an army of volunteers pretty early on that created this flywheel of momentum that just kept going and going to the point where there was no way they couldn't be a 50 plus year nonprofit because of this army of volunteers that helped them. So that's one of those areas that it might be a blind spot for lots of nonprofit leaders who think it's on me to get the next $10,000. Well, maybe the better way to get not just the next 10,000, but the next $10,000 gifts is not fundraising just solo yourself, but growing the number of people that are helping you do that.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point as well. A lot of organizations that I have calls with say they don't have any individual donors or they don't have major donors, but they have a volunteer program. And I'm like, you have people who have already said yes to your organization. So what would you coach someone that is, we need donations and we have volunteers who maybe not have given monetarily, but like they show up every single week and volunteer and they've built that community within your organization. How would you coach them to have those conversations with those volunteers to mobilize on behalf of the organization to raise revenue?
Yeah, great question. This is one of the advantages of having a lot of corporate world experience with McKinsey and sales and financial services and bringing that over to the nonprofit world, because it's an axiom of sales that you could grow an entire business, an entire company off of just 50 people. All it takes is 50 people who believe in you, refer you, keep an eye out for you, send you business, give you business themselves. All it takes is 50 true believers to grow anything. So I would say that you're in a sprint from the time you found that nonprofit to get to that 50. And every person you collect, whether they're a volunteer or a monthly donor, or maybe a beneficiary even, that's a big miss in a lot of cases, where someone who's benefited from your organization, turning them into a true believer that actually ends up doing real work for your organization. All it takes is 50 of those true believers, and you are collecting them, curating them, thanking them, obsessing over them, handwritten noting to them. You are doing everything you can to stick them to your organization and grow them into the 50. And then once you hit 50, you've got your little army. So then you can actually turn them loose and start to really make a lot of ground in terms of fundraising.
Yeah, I love that. And I feel like 50 is such an attainable number too, right? You don't have to think you have to start with hundreds of donors, start with 50. And I think that is more realistic. And then it'll multiply and grow to that 100. Hey there, podcast family. If you're like me and deeply committed to improving your leadership skills and fostering better connections with your team, I've got something truly amazing to share with you. I'm proud to introduce the EMC Masterclass, something I talk about often as a certified trainer. It's an incredible program developed by the renowned Dr. Lola Gershfeld, an organizational psychologist and corporate emotional connection expert. You might remember her from a podcast episode where she shared invaluable insights into the world of emotional connection. Dr. Gershfeld's EMC Leaders courses are designed for anyone working with people, whether you're a manager, supervisor, team leader, educator, coach, mentor, or a team member. This program is truly for everyone looking to enhance their communication and collaboration skills to raise more revenue for their mission. Now, let me tell you why the EMC Masterclass is a game changer. Dr. Gershfeld's groundbreaking emotional connection process has been integrated into top universities' curriculum and recognized by international organizations like ICF, HRCI, and SHRM. Humans are wired to seek emotional safety, and when we feel safe, we're more likely to take risks, share innovative ideas, and collaborate effectively. The EMC process is the catalyst for creating that emotional safety within your team. The virtual EMC Masterclass consists of 8 modules with 4 hours of expertly recorded material, 13 quizzes to reinforce your learning, and a workbook filled with activities for offline practice and something I still refer to daily. Ready to become an emotional connection master? Dr. Gershfeld is offering an exclusive detail for our podcast listeners. Use the code LEADWITHHEART to enjoy a generous 10% discount on the EMC Masterclass. Head over to emcleaders.com and enroll in the EMC Masterclass today.
Totally. And I'm working with clients right now that just cannot get out of this broadcast mindset when it comes to fundraising. If I only send one more LinkedIn post, if I only send one more email blast, if I only do one more Instagram on social media, one more YouTube video, they think they're just one more broadcast away from all the funds rolling in. And it just breaks my heart because they're not even one step down the road of gaining their 50 people because they keep broadcasting. Maybe that's resonating with someone in your audience to say, you know what, let me shut the broadcast off until I get my 50, and then maybe I can come back to it.
Yeah, I love that. And I've never thought of it that way. And fundraising is obviously a crucial aspect of nonprofit success and sustainability, but it can also be one of the most challenging, especially for nonprofits if they're starting out, or maybe they've been around for a long time, but have never done traditional fundraising and they don't know where to start. So what are some innovative strategies or insights that you have found to be most effective in helping nonprofits improve their fundraising efforts?
Yeah, my answer will be in line with what we've talked about before in terms of prioritization. But I love making you can call it the spine of any fundraising effort is the gift range chart. This tool is called different things in different places, but as I start to describe it, your listeners will probably think it sounds familiar, but really what you do is just list your levels of gifts that you ideally want to get from greatest to least. So let's say that we were trying to raise $500,000. 20% of any gift size that you're trying to raise needs to come from one gift. So 20% from one gift. So that top line is going to be $100,000. Next column, we're looking for one gift. How many prospects do we need to talk to or ask to raise that one gift? Maybe if we know a lot of people that love us, maybe 4. Maybe that's our ratio. 4 asks to one gift. Maybe if we're just starting from scratch, it's 10 asks to one gift. But that kind of gives us the number of people that we need to ask to get that $100,000 gift. So $100,000, 2 50s, 4 25s, 10 $10,000 gifts, and $25,000 gifts. That's our gift range chart at those levels. We've got the number of prospects that we need, and then we just start making a list of basically all of those prospects that we're going to go after. You can use that one gift range chart to generate an entire development strategy. And the tragedy is that a lot of nonprofit leaders think bottom up, in terms of an even spread of gifts across lots of small ones. They look at that $500,000 and they say, oh gosh, if we could only get 1,000 people to give $500, then we'd be just fine. And it breaks my heart when I hear that, because that's not how fundraising works. It really is this kind of hockey stick kind of thing where you get one gift that's 20% of your total. And you really do need to put effort into finding that one large major donor 20% gift. So I'd say if there were one tool I could wave a magic wand and have every nonprofit using tomorrow when it comes to development, it would be that gift range chart.
Yeah, and it's something as simple as Googling it. That like there's free gift range charts if you just Google it. I don't remember the specific one that I've used, but I know that if you literally just type it into Google, the gift range charts will pop up. You type in your revenue, like you type in that 500,000, and it'll break it down for you in terms of, like you said, the number of prospects to the actual number of gifts you need based on each level. And I think, yeah, that helps put it into perspective. And you said, what is that barrier? I would love to know your insight on, because you have these conversations of, well, if I could just ask for $1,000 from 500 people versus one person to make a meaningful gift of 100,000, like what gap do you see between that? It's not easier to ask 500 people, but that would seem more challenging in my mind. I'm also a fundraiser, so I have a different perspective, but what is that challenge or mindset shift that needs to happen to be able to ask for those major meaningful gifts?
I tend to search for the most charitable answer with some of those things. Is any of these kind of why don't they or why don't they just questions.
Yeah.
There's always a reason, and people don't voluntarily try to make the unwise choice. So there is a wisdom there. What is that wisdom? I would say it's probably for most nonprofit leaders coming from a place of their own ability to give, and they put their grid, they take their framework of what is sacrificial and huge to give, and they don't think beyond that for other people too. The leaders tend to be some of the most compassionate, empathetic, big-hearted, incredible people on the planet. So what will they do when they start to think about sacrificial giving? They'll port their own definition of what sacrificial is into their development plan to say, good Lord, I could never have the cheek of asking anyone for $1,000 or more, because that's not something my family could afford to give. So they would think that was really out of bounds to do with some of the people that they know. But the truth is that most nonprofit leaders who are successful at fundraising get themselves over that cognitive speed bump by saying, $500 for me, that feeling that generates, it's a completely different number for a lot of other people all around the town in which we live. People who care about my mission, I could say $25,000 wouldn't even generate that level of butterflies and turmoil that 500 does for me. So it's just thinking through different people are in different places with their money, and whatever that number is that causes them butterflies, we can back up a step from that. So if 50,000 gives that person butterflies, we can back up to 35,000, 25,000, and then say that I'm doing a service to them to help them flow that money through their lives to their deepest held commitments in a way that's really going to bless not just the place where they send that money, but that'll bless them. I'm doing them a charitable service by helping them direct their money that way. So yeah, it's getting out of your own way as far as that number being sacrificial for someone else, and then thinking, I'm doing a service for them. I'm actually blessing them to be able to help them direct money that way.
Ooh, I love that perspective and that wisdom and insight that you just gave about how to take yourself out of the equation and really view it as an act of service. And I think that's so beneficial. And I think when we're talking about fundraising, I would be remiss not to bring up the idea of board fundraising. And I get asked to talk on this topic, and I have my own perspective onto why boards aren't necessarily engaged in fundraising. It's a little bit of different perspective than probably most people do, but I would love to know, what are some of the challenges that you find leaders face in mobilizing their boards to become their best ambassadors?
Yeah, it's complicated and fraught with lots of different complexities depending upon the organization. But I will say that by and large, the board problem across the United States is a talent problem. So if we see it through that lens, how did we get ourselves into a talent problem with boards by and large? Well, if you can bring to mind most of the nonprofit leaders and nonprofits, the desperation that they feel to get board members is such that anybody who shows even a little bit of interest in being on the board of a lot of these nonprofits, especially newer ones. Certainly some of the larger ones have what's competitive and there's large giving amounts and all of those sorts of things. But those are the kind of the blue blood nonprofits that we're talking about. For most, the 90% of nonprofits, they're desperate for anyone to come in and be on the board. And if they come to a board meeting regularly, they have just launched themselves into the top 5 percentile of board members. So you laugh, but even the way I just said it makes clear that it's a talent problem, right?
Yeah.
Is if it's a just wide open door, we'll take anybody who comes in. We're falling all over ourselves to be grateful for anything that they do. We're not getting chippy with board members about their performance. We're not having performance discussions or dialogues with board members. We're not holding board members to metrics. Why? Because we're desperate. So that's where we are. And everything else that we see in the board world just issues from that root cause, which is, I think we're so desperate for board members, we're taking anyone, and that results in the talent problem we have now.
Yeah, I've also seen a lot of at least startup nonprofits or even just like new EDs coming in and putting their friends on the board. And then they have that, not necessarily a talent problem, but that idea of yes people. They hired their friends so that they could say yes and do whatever. And there is a time and place for that. But yeah, I have seen that. We put in our bylaws, we need X amount of seats around the boardroom. So we're just going to find our friends and family and network of whoever can come onto the board to fill those seats.
I agree with you. Yeah. And I'll frame that sort of phenomenon in a slightly different way, which is to say, when there are people that you love and care about around you, you're solving first and foremost for what? How to affirm them, right? This relationship is one of the core relationships of your life. So when they make a recommendation, when they have an idea, when they say something, the initial kind of reaction that you have is not so much to evaluate that, determine, is that going to be the best for our mission? Is that going to be in line with what's going to actually grow this thing? No, the first thought that comes to mind is how to be hyper polite and affirm whatever they just said as solid gold. So yeah, that's maybe what happens when you get people around you that you have that relationship or affinity with. You're going to run into these situations of hyper politeness where everybody on the board is just being super kind to each other. But in some cases, that doesn't result in top team performance when you're trying to change the world.
Yeah, I love that reframe. And can you talk a little bit more about Board Spark and what that specifically looks like in terms of your framework to really help these board dynamics?
Yeah. Board retreats are nothing new. All of us know that board retreats, if you get everybody together and have a couple good questions teed up and everybody feels it's a safe place to share and to problem solve, that's a situation that just naturally lends itself to forcing people to use their strengths and talents in a way maybe that goes way beyond what they have been used to in their board roles. So it's almost like a forced exception to the talent desert that we find on a lot of boards. What I bring in Board Spark that builds upon that and is different than that is the interview piece. If you go around to each board member one-on-one individually, and they feel like it's a safe place, a confidential place to answer 2 questions, if you wanted to say that there's a set of things we want to keep the same, don't touch it, it's working about this nonprofit, what would that list of keeps be? And the second question, what is holding us back from being everything that we could be as a nonprofit? What would be those changes that you would make that would relieve some of those things holding us back? Just asking those 2 questions in a confidential, safe way, one-on-one with each board member beforehand, so that external facilitator builds the full picture. And in the first hour of the board retreat, reads that back to the group. My goodness, that first hour is a time of breakthrough, insights, sometimes tears, emotions, sometimes much needed resignations, sometimes people stepping up into the roles that they were meant to fill. Magic happens when you bring the truth in a safe way into a group of talented people. And I think that's what makes Board Spark unique.
Yeah, I love that. And I think really building that, like you said, that safe environment where people feel like they can speak up or be innovative, take risks together, it really helps drive that mission forward.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's when you get the ground rules in place in that first hour as well. Just based on talking with each of the board members, you do have a sense of what some of the landmines will be, especially if you've done 20, 50, 100 board retreats. You start to see the same personalities just with different faces. So as you have these personalities in these boards, you as the facilitator can set ground rules that are somewhat tailored to that board group. Say, all right, guys, in kind of a funny, humorous way, you can even name the archetypes of the different people that might emerge during the board retreat. And with these funny names, half a day into the retreat, somebody starts to maybe misbehave. And the rest of the group says, you're being and that named thing comes out and the group polices itself. So yeah, a little bit of preparation goes a long way in making these board retreats truly incredible.
Yeah. Who is leading this board retreat? Is it recommended to bring in a third party to facilitate it? Is it the board chair and the executive director? What is the best way to go about creating this safe environment and dynamic where they can make those strategic decisions on behalf of the organization?
Yeah. And I'll add to decisions, not just decisions for the organization, but commitments themselves. That is probably even more of an important outcome than just some theoretical decision for the organization to do, because then they turn to the executive director and go say, have a big day, and they disappear again. No, what you're coming out of the board retreat with is each board member making their own commitments. That being the case, if each board member and staff member involved is going to need to make that commitment and have the ability to be a part of the process, then yeah, that's what makes an external facilitator so valuable, is it gives everyone that chance to be in it with an eye towards making that commitment by the end of the board retreat.
Ooh, I love that. You talk about living out your core purpose of building factories of hope. Can you elaborate on what this means to you and how it influences both your personal and professional life?
Wow. Yeah, we're going deep, Haley. I think for high achievers, and I wouldn't boastingly put myself in that category at all. I'm just generalizing the fact that anybody who has a talent at things or has been used to getting an A through their school life or in the military, in my case, or in the corporate world, you'll go through a long stretch of life having A's defined for you. And there comes a point in life when you actually have to step back and define the A for yourself. And some people are in their 40s, 50s, 60s, and they still haven't done that. They are still living according to the A's. What is an A? According to the other people's as they define it for me. When I went through that soul searching myself, I defined getting an A in my life as building a factory of hope. My family is a factory of hope. The way I work out my faith is a factory of hope. The things that I've done on a volunteer basis is a factory of hope. And Sparrow Nonprofit Solutions, that when I founded it, I wanted it to be like the McKinsey of the nonprofit world, to be a factory that gave hope to beleaguered, forlorn, weary nonprofit leaders who think that they're the only one who cares or the one who cares the most. And I think every nonprofit leader hits that spot where, why doesn't anyone give a rip around me? And I wanted to give every nonprofit leader I could the feeling that, you know what, you are not alone. There are plenty who give a rip around you, and I'm going to help you find them. That's a factory of hope. So that's a little bit of the insight for me. Is that's how I defined what an A is in my life. And I won't turn the tables back on you because you're the interviewer, but if you wanted to share what your core purpose is, my goodness, I'm sure your listeners would love to know.
Yeah, I think that's so beautiful. And yeah, I've definitely taken time to reflect on what does success look like more than just like a monetary goal, right? And how can I then define that and live out that success in my daily life. And I'm going to take this question back and I'll get back to you and our listeners on what that factory of hope looks like for me. But Derik, this has been such a wonderful conversation. Where can people find you in the work that you do?
Yeah, I would say the most memorable is myeasygrant.com. That is the entry place for most of our clients to start working with us, is that grants on autopilot. So myeasygrant.com is the easiest place for them to find us.
Awesome. Well, we will make sure to link to all the things in the show notes. Go give Derik a follow, click on his website. Thank you so much for being here. I've learned so much from you and I truly appreciate the chat.
It's been a pleasure, Haley. Be well, happy, and peaceful.
If you have valued these stories or learned something from what you've heard, please share this podcast episode or follow me on LinkedIn. Thank you so much for your support, and together we can build a better community and world.